Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today, and welcome to another episode of Banking Matters. If you're a regular listener, then you're probably noticing the new face, but I am your new co-host, Laura Benson. Today, I'm excited to be recording my first podcast, and as many of you know, the first of the month, we try to keep the conversation internal. Today, I'm happy to have Julia Gutierrez, who is another co-host of the podcast, joining me today. You've probably seen Julia before in previous episodes of the podcast or at one of the live trainings that she does all over the US. Julia is Compliance Alliance's Director of Education, and today we will be discussing all things training and education. Hey, Julia, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Laura. How are you doing?
Oh, pretty good. Good. It's just storming outside, so I'm trying to huddle in and stay warm, which is strange, but it's like 60 degrees outside and it's August, but I guess that's what you get when you live in Montana.
Oh, goodness. Well, it is
I know.
still hot here, but the summer is certainly winding down, and we're starting to see a little bit of change, but not too much. It's still pretty warm, but summer's definitely winding down a bit.
Yeah, and you're in North Carolina, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so have your kids started school yet?
Yes, they did start school. They just started about a week and a half ago, a little earlier than usual, but I think we were all ready to sort of get back in the routine and just, get back into school. They were happy to see their friends, happy to just, start a new year and mainly to start all their sports again. That seems to keep me busy these days.
Oh yeah, we're not quite at the age of school sports yet, but I'm gonna just enjoy the calm before the storm. But yeah, my kids start back next week, and we're all definitely ready for that. So, well, considering that you travel the country conducting trainings, I'm sure you're just chomping at the bit to saturate the internet with your knowledge as well. It's like get everybody in person, get everyone online. You're just going to be all over the place, Julia.
Yeah, definitely. With summer kind of coming to an end, we really start to see an uptick in our compliance education events. So we've got a lot of good things on the horizon for Compliance Alliance education, for sure.
Yeah, and I just started with Compliance Alliance back in March, so I haven't met you in person yet as a coworker, but I have seen you around. Over the years, I've been to a couple of the Compliance Alliance trainings, some of the conferences that you guys have done through various state bankers associations prior to coming here. So I definitely know that you do a lot of traveling because I've seen you personally in several states.
Yes, I travel a good bit. We travel all over. I absolutely love coming out west. Montana is gorgeous. I absolutely love when I have the opportunity to come there, and I'm so glad that you're on our team now, and we get to have this opportunity to work together.
Yeah, I'm really liking it so far. It's been challenging, but in a really good way. I kind of like a challenge, so it's nice that I'm not sitting around twiddling my thumbs. I'm actually quite the opposite. I work a lot. But how often do you travel?
Well, it really depends on the time of the year. We're really busiest during the spring and the fall when it comes to conferences, schools, seminars, things like that. During those times of the year, I can easily travel for an event. Each week, and sometimes we get super busy, and I may even hit more than one event in a 1 week period of time. Of course, we do have some travel in the summer and the winter as well. It's just not quite as packed of a schedule as what we see, in the spring and the fall when people are trying to get in all those training events before they get into the summer, those training events before they get into the holiday season. um, I have a great deal of speaking opportunities coming up. Over the next few months, I'll be speaking at the Indiana Bankers Association Cyber Fraud and Physical Security Conference, the Texas Bankers Association Annual Real Estate Lending School, the Utah Bankers Association Annual Compliance School, and those are just a few of kind of what we have on the horizon. But certainly this time of year, it starts to really get busy.
Yeah, well, you got sound like you got a busy end to the year coming up.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you ever get tired of traveling or wish you could take a break, or is it just something that you've been doing for so long you just kind of used to it?
Of course, traveling frequently comes with its own set of challenges. But overall, I don't get tired of seeing new places and having that opportunity to meet new people. I do get that opportunity for some downtime during those slower months, especially summer. We have a couple of events throughout the summer, but in general, it's a fairly slower time for us in education. So it's a great time to vacation and do all of those things. And same with the holidays. I'm typically pretty slow during the holiday season, so it's always pretty easy to make plans and vacations and things like that, just because we are a little bit slower. So having some of those down periods, make it a lot easier to do. So I really do enjoy it.
Yeah, that's nice. You get to stay home a lot during the summer and especially around the holidays because, family matters just as much, if not more. Just kidding. Of
Absolutely.
course, it's more, right?
Absolutely.
So, if I remember correctly, you've been in banking for about 20 years, and the majority of that has been in compliance. Can you just tell us a little bit about how you got into compliance and ultimately what led to you doing training and education full time?
Yeah. I've been in banking just over 20 years in some capacity. I've been on the consulting side for about the last 10 years. I first got into banking as a teller during, right as I started college. I was hired as a part-time teller, so worked in the afternoons and all Saturdays and every summer and all that good stuff. And somehow banking just seemed to be, my thing. I enjoyed that area, and I worked in the branch for several years. I've done new accounts, branch manager, things like that. And it just always seemed to kind of fit. And it's funny, I remember kind of starting out, and there were so many folks that talked about, they've been in banking 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, gosh, it seems so long. And I just never thought that I'd end up there that long. It just seemed impossible. But then fast forward a bit, and here I am still in the banking world in some realm.
Yeah,
After I was
been
the
in
branch side
banking.
for a few years, yeah, I started in compliance, and I really just found that compliance was an area that fit me most. And how I got in education was about 5 years ago. Compliance Alliance offered me the opportunity to travel and share some of that compliance knowledge, and the travel part really sold me. So here I am living my best compliance professional life right now. So
Living your best compliance life. I love it. That's so funny. Yeah, and now you're one of those people now that's like, yeah, I've been in banking for 20 years and it's crazy how fast it goes by. I personally it's been about 12 or 13 for me and that still just seems really weird. But it does go by fast. It's wild. But training is something that I enjoy doing. There's a lot of areas that I'm passionate about, but if it's not something that's like my niche, then I don't know. It seems like a chore for me unless it's something that I really enjoy talking about. Because it's impossible to know everything there is to know, especially when it comes to compliance. And so I'm always worried that someone's going to ask me some like crazy rogue, like one-off weird scenario question that I'm not going to know the answer to. And I don't know, have you ever had any horror stories like that happen to you where you're just like, oh, this is such a weird question or so strange?
I thought that used to be a fear of mine. I was always afraid that, when I started, like, what if we're asked a question we don't know the answer to? How will we appear? And the truth is, we can't ever know all of the answers. It doesn't matter how much experience we have in banking, compliance, any of those areas. We're never going to know all of it. Even when we're experts in certain areas, we're still always learning. And the one thing about compliance that we can depend on is that it's always going to be, evolving and changing. One of the best things that I think you can do is to, tell folks when you don't know the answer to something, it's okay to not know the answer. And I have found that, you generally get a much better level of respect when you say, that's a great question. I think it's this, but I'm not 100% sure. Let me look at that. Let me get back to you. So I think people, understand that. And if you've been in compliance for a nanosecond, you know that there's always something changing. And there's always something new. So I think people, really do understand if you don't have all of the answers.
Yeah, that is so true. And there's been so many times too where I've done the same thing because I'm like, I don't want to misspeak and I don't want someone to say, well, she told me this and it wasn't correct just because I'm off the cuff. I want to take a step back and just confirm or validate maybe what I'm thinking at the same time. But being that I've been to a couple of your trainings, one of the things that I thought was really cool and what's great about, having the Compliance Alliance team behind you is there has been times where you and the other speaker, you're switching off and you've shot a question over to, another speaker and they're kind of researching it for you or kind of throwing that out to the rest of the team to kind of look at for you. And then you can keep training and keep going while they kind of research on the backside, and then you can follow up with it later. So I've always thought that's great. And it just kind of shows you that compliance really is a team effort because everybody's brains together. That's very, very valuable.
And that is one thing I love about compliance. I mean, this is one of those areas where really and truly we're not competing with each other. We're all kind of working together. We are always talking to other banks, asking other bankers, hey, how did you do this? Well, how did that work for you? What is your recommendation? What were challenges you face? And I love that about this area of compliance is that we're not, in a competition for sales or something like that. We truly can work together and really network. And that's, one of the greatest things about this area of banking.
Yes, that's so true. So, in your experiences traveling and training on compliance, like what are some of the areas that you typically see people like struggling with or having the most questions on? Because I know that I have my regulations that I absolutely hate with a passion. And I'm just curious to see, like, is there a theme?
Well, certainly those hot topics are always questions we get asked. Right now it seems like if we're out and about training, we're always going to get questions on CRA and 1071. Those are really just, at the forefront for everyone. And luckily our hotline team keep the rest of us at Compliance Alliance in the loop with some of those hot topics, as well as our auditors, our virtual compliance officers. They're always sharing what they see from bankers, which is really helpful for me as well, going out and teaching, because if I know that these are, the expectations that, bankers have questions about, and these are the hot topics for bankers, I can be prepared, to answer those questions. Some of the topics that we've seen, kind of consistently that, are a challenge are areas like flood or a TRID, of course, Reg E and those disputes and things like that. And of course, fair lending it seems like it's always sort of one of those hot topics. So those are kind of the areas that I guess I would say that I've seen sort of most often and get the most questions about.
Yeah, it's so funny that you mentioned flood because I always think about like that. That's one of the ones that I just hate so much with a passion. That and Reggie. So you hit my two favorite, like I guess least favorite ones. And so it's interesting that you say that. And sometimes I wonder, especially with like, location wise, like does it seem to be fairly consistent across the country or just like in certain areas? So for example, like I live in Montana and I just think off of the top of my head, like coastal areas, right? And like you guys get hurricanes and, so I just assume that like banks in that area would probably have like their flood like tied up with a bow and like just have a really strong like process for that. But, versus like us up in the mountains that like hardly ever get any flooding. But that's an assumption that I make, but I don't know that that's always the case. So I'm just kind of curious what you think and if you kind of see any trends like that, depending on where you're speaking.
Occasionally see some of those trends. Like you said, when you're somewhere where flood is so important, you do tend to get more detailed questions. Folks really want to make sure they're doing things the right way. So we see a little bit of that. But, mainly I think you can really depend on what are those hot topics, for examiners. One of the things that I always try to, gauge is, anytime I'm traveling somewhere, like, what did your examiners focus on? I always ask, what did your examiners look at? What were some of the hot button things? Because, even in a room full of people in the same area, you'll see that there are some trends there. So I always try to use those trends and share them with our, the rest of our team at CA and vice versa. If they see something on the audit team or they're starting to see a lot of things on hotline or VCO, they're seeing things within their banks, they let us know, like, hey, here's the hot button items. So there's certainly some things that we see, throughout different parts of the country, but a lot of it really is kind of more geared towards what the examiners are sort of focusing on in an area.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense too, because you can kind of see that it kind of goes in waves. So it's always like the new things that are upcoming and changes, but then there also just seems to be like a wave of something. And since we're kind of talking about flood and waves, no pun intended, but I just think back of like, end of 2018-19 when the FDIC, made a big deal about, the language in your deed and inadvertently taking contents coverage. And they kind of hit banks all over the country with that one. And so then it was a big hot topic all over again when it really hadn't been for a while. So that's great advice. So I'm curious too, with all the feedback and like, with traveling and the feedback that you get to hear about while traveling, like what's your opinion on how banks can improve or maximize on the education experience that they're getting with the live training? Just to make sure that that information is getting taken back to the bank. Other employees, maybe they have some potential changes that they need to implement. What's kind of your opinion and thoughts on that?
One of the things that we try to do, both with our tools and anytime we're traveling, but again with our webinars and everything that we offer, we always do a PowerPoint presentation and a manual. And the reason we do that is because a lot of times when you look at a presentation, you may not know what the speaker's thoughts were exactly. May not have all the information, so that manual accompanying that really helps. We also try to leave those documents in that format, the PowerPoint and those Word documents. So that way bankers can take that information back to their team and they can adjust it, they can edit it, for their specific institution. So they can really, make it unique and make it their own. I think one of the most important things to ensure that education is sort of passed along within an institution is to really incorporate that into those internal policies and procedures, always touching on training, in those various policies. It's going to really be key because if we start focusing on that, we make it a priority, then, the other stuff sort of follows and we start to kind of get in a habit and into a really good groove. So I think it kind of starts with those processes first. And once we have that in place, then folks know, hey, when we go out to a training, let's bring that material back. Let's use this, let's train. And I think that really kind of ties together. But we certainly want to make sure, and we try to remind our bankers to share that information. Training is going to be, key to compliance. So making sure everybody's on the same page and not just kind of keeping all that knowledge to yourself. But again, just really leaving those things in some user-friendly formats for our bankers, I think is something that can be really helpful.
Yeah, and those training manuals are great. I know I still have several from years ago. But Julia, of course, in your line of work, one of the biggest tasks is keeping those things like your manuals up to date. And so, and that would make, you have to make sure that you're staying up to date and abreast of any of regulatory environment and changes. And so I'm just curious, like, how does Compliance Alliance's resources help keep you up to speed with reg changes and just keep your training materials up to date as well?
Well, we always stay up to date. Somebody's always monitoring on our teams for different changes that are coming along, new rules that are coming out, proposed rules, all of that stuff. We keep a calendar, we have training, we have all of those things. And we really do truly work together on the Compliance Alliance team to help one another. So it's a group effort. Anytime I have questions, if I want to know something's changed or what someone's opinion is, I can look out on our website. We always have summaries for those things. We can ask members of our hotline team. We ask our BCOs. We ask our auditors. But the website really is, a wonderful, tool to use for our members, and it's something that I use on a regular basis as well to make sure I'm staying up to date and staying abreast of what's going on in the regulatory world.
Yeah, so true. It's a team effort. Well, Julia, thank you so much for chatting with me today. In true banking matters fashion, we always like to ask, what is one piece of advice that you'd like to share with our listeners today?
I guess kind of just as part of our training piece, if you don't know the answer, that is okay. Always be willing to, go back and research or, ask other folks, what their opinion is in conjunction with your research. But, never feel like you have to know all of the answers because you're a compliance professional. Reach out and ask for help. Use those resources.
Yes, that's such great advice. Thank you, Julia. For those of you listening, if you're interested in learning more about Compliance Alliance's educational materials, please visit compliancealliance.com/training. In addition to our live in-person trainings, our Compliance Hub's online bank training features at least 3 webinars monthly on hot topics, along with refresher training videos suitable for both seasoned professionals and newcomers. The webinars are covered through Back to Basics features and a quarterly Board of Directors sessions. Members can access archived webinars, which are regularly updated to reflect changes, and peer-to-peer huddles, which are my personal favorite, provide moderated discussions among compliance professionals nationwide. And lastly, compliance minutes and tool segments are published twice monthly, and they cover various consumer banking regulation topics. So you can never get enough training. So as Julia said, just please check out all of the resources on our training page. And I've included a link to that training page in the description box for your convenience. For all you listeners out there, if you're interested in being a guest, please reach out to us at info@compliancealliance.com, and one of the hosts will reach out to you to line something up. So Julia, thank you again so much for joining us today, and that's Banking Matters.